Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, "Don't Threaten Me with Taking Your Business Elsewhere." I used to work in a branch of Barclays on a high street in an affluent university town. Customer comes in and starts giving me crap for something. It was about 4 to 5 years ago, so I can't recall, but I think it was something like he had had bad service in a different branch or call center. So he goes in at me saying how crappy Barclays is, agreed, and how much better other banks are, and that he doesn't really use his account with us and that he would close his account with us if we didn't sort something out by way of a threat. I asked him to confirm he wanted to close his account, and his pride wouldn't let him back down from his original threat while he was in front of other people. He confirms. Then carries on his tirade. I immediately close his bank account with Barclays and transfer him the money that was in it and ask him if there is anything else I can do for him. He then starts complaining about me closing his account, and I tell him that as he isn't a customer with Barclays, unless he wants anything else, could he please leave. The situation was very tense and he was very loud and shouty. I thought he could do with being taken down a peg, so I took away the tool he was using to threaten me with. I probably sound like a dick, but duck that guy and retail jobs. The next story is titled, "Fine Then Just Quit." Okay. So when I was freshly out of high school, I hadn't decided on what I wanted to do with my life, so I got a job at a pizza place near where I lived. I've always been the type of person who would rather work than sit at home, and I don't have a ton of friends to hang out with. They started out having me just making the food deliveries once or twice a week, but that quickly turned into them calling me in daily about an hour after they opened because the owners didn't want to make the deliveries and they were the only ones working front of house. Like I mentioned previously, I didn't mind coming into work and would always say that it wasn't a problem. About 2 weeks into me working at the pizza shop, the owners insisted that I learn register because they were no longer willing to do it themselves during the week. Okay, sure, no problem, it's just more money for me. They continued training me in every aspect of running the physical business over the next month. Every once in a while the owners would say they want to make me a manager so they can leave whenever they want. Great, I thought. As time went on, I would work anywhere between 60 to 80 hours per week because other employees would call out or not show, and the owners didn't want to stick around to deal with it. They even trusted me to hire a server, and a delivery driver, cashier. About 8 months into working there, running myself ragged for them and never getting so much as a thank you for everything I did for them, I decided to sit down with one of the owners and express the way I felt to them. Me: "Hey, boss one, I know you keep saying you want to make me a manager, is there any reason you haven't yet?" Boss one: "Just haven't found the time or reason to train you for it yet." Me: "What do you mean? I already know how to do everything from taking orders to ordering supplies when we're running low on something." Boss one: "Yes, but it's not your place to do all those things yet." Me: "What do you mean?" Boss one: "You're not a manager, you should not be doing manager tasks." "Alright, that's how you want to play it? Then consider it done." For the next 2 weeks I didn't do anything aside from what they hired me to do, make deliveries, and only on my scheduled days. This went on for about 2 days and really upset the owners because now at least one of them had to be there at all times to make sure everything else was getting done. Eventually boss one called me into his back office to talk. Boss one: "Cranky, what has gotten into you?" Me: "What do you mean?" Boss one: "You know you need to put in orders for supplies, yet we're running out of flour and out soda syrup, and no orders have been placed." Me: "I'm sorry, boss one, but you told me that I'm not a manager and I shouldn't be acting like one, so I stopped." Boss one: "Stop being a child, Cranky, you know your responsibilities here and you need to do your job." Me: "I am doing my job, and only my job. If you want to make me a manager, I'll be happy to do those things." Boss one: "You really think I'm going to make you a manager after this?" Me: "If I'm not a manager, then I won't do a manager's job." Boss one: "Fine then, just quit. You need to get over yourself." Me: "Okay, I quit. As of right now I'm done." Boss one: "Fine." So, I left. I was scheduled to work all week, which meant that they were out of basically a manager. I ended up getting a call the following afternoon from boss one demanding to know why I was so late for work, but I just reminded him that I no longer worked there. Now, I was and still am very close friends with some old coworkers and heard all the drama as it unfolded. Turns out most of the employees ended up refusing to work because the owners had to be there full-time now and they were awful. My time working there I hired about 5 people, and all 5 left because I wasn't there to play manager anymore. They ended up closing about 6 months after I left because they couldn't get anyone to stay longer than about 2 weeks. The next story is titled, A Guy in a Bad Mood Walk into the Fast Food Joint. Cast. A very irritated guy in a horrible mood, me. A store full of rude minimum wage works. A table full of Karens. A few months ago I was looking for a job. I spent most of my day walking downtown in interviews. At this point, I'm in a horrible mood. The only interviews that showed any interest were the ones that looked swifty AF. Most of the day is gone, the whole thing was just a farce, and I'm starving. It was one of these days that nothing goes right. After I was done, I choose to grab a bite. I choose a big local chain of fast food as they make decent food with quite a low price. As I enter, the first thing I notice is that it's kinda full, but the register was empty. I sighed as that usually means they have a lot of orders in the back, and my food would be kinda late. I walk there and the employees, teenagers, probably part-timers or their first job, were giggling on the phone. One of them glances at me and say one moment. All right, I have no problem with that. And I wait. And wait. And wait. At some point I look at the clock behind them. I was waiting awkwardly, in front of 2 giggling teenagers for 4 minutes. I decided not to make a big deal out of it. I politely and discreetly clear my throat. The same teen rolls her eyes at me, evidently very annoyed that I interrupted again. The irritation of the day starts creeping out, but as I have worked retail most of my life, I hold it in. What do you want to order? She asks in a very rude manner. At this point, I'm quite sure I have a vein popping out, anime style. I swallow my temper. I have to point out, I am generally very polite in my social interactions, especially towards employees, having worked retail most of my life, and order my food, 2 small burgers and a cola, totaling something like €5.5. She rolls her eyes again. Wow, spending the big bucks aren't we, in the most condescending, annoyingly bratty voice you can imagine. At this point I just shrug my shoulders, my upbringing preventing me to make the remarks my brain was screaming at me. I move on a corner on one of those tall bar tables on the side to wait my order, and I take out my small notebook to write some notes on the last interview. I keep notes on the owner's attitudes and other small detail I noticed during the interview. As I mind my bushiness, a wild Karen encroaches on my personal space. Excuse me? Are you listening to me? I'm speaking to you. I turn around and I'm like, what? Are you gonna take our order now, or are you gonna keep pretending to work? I blinked. Then it hit me. I was wearing a similar attire with the employees, a red polo t-shirt and dark blue jeans. Of course, one could mention the fact that my red shirt was a different shade than the store uniform, that mine lacked the store logo and the name tag, not to mention a big leather bag hanging from my side. My years of experience taught me that Karen cells cannot coexist with brain cells. I tried to tell her that I don't work here and that she must go to the register, something to point here. The way ordering works in big franchises here is, you go to the register, you make your order, you pay and a server bring it to you. Very rarely would a server go to your table, usually if you take a while to order. After a while of demanding I take her order, I said screw this and I complied. I took her order. Alright, ma'am, where is your table? She points at the 5 Karen table and I nod. I will be right there. FN kids, all you know is how to avoid working, you should get fired you lazy thing. She says as she leaves. I'm 30. No longer a kid, but I do look very young, 24 to 26 with a beard, around 20 shaved, which I was at that time. I would not have it. I was hungry, in horrible mood, and years of self-discipline were crumbling as I was hungry for blood. I went to the nightmare table that consisted of not 1, not 2, but 6 whole Karens. I put my biggest, fakest of smiles and I took the order. I even suggested a few non-existent dishes, while ghost writing on my notebook. I then pointed out that I was a big order and it'll take a while. I then left the nightmare on Karen table and went back in a corner and waited my order in a far better mood. While waiting, a server went to their table and asked if they had ordered. Yes, we have. Are all the stuff here as lazy as you? At this point I started grinning. She had a chance to fully undo my master plan and she failed to grasp it. I wait for 5 more minutes for my order, I take and leave a happy man. I can only imagine the Karens trying to reorder the non-existent dishes I recommended, after 20 to 30 minutes of not getting their order, only to be constantly told they don't exist, as well as the despairing faces of the staff trying to reason with Karens. The Karen would wait quite a bit to eat, if they managed to eat at all, while also giving hell to the employees. Essentially, I played an angry mob of Karens into fighting against some very rude employees while I made a gateway with my prized booty of calories, fat, and ice-cold vengeance. Granted, after calming down a bit I did felt kinda bad for feeding a couple inexperienced part-timers to the Karen sharks, but I was caught in the moment. The next story is titled, Don't Do Any Work. Okay. For context, this is my dad's story. He used to work for a small plumbing company that would install the large coffee machines in coffee shops. So my dad always showed up to his job about 30 minutes early because he had to take the bus to work. It was no big deal to him, just a part of his commute. Part of how his job worked was it was an 8-hour work day, but if you finished the last job before the end of your shift you could go home for the day. My dad, a good worker, would only take a fraction of his 30-minute lunch to work, then work for the rest of it. He did this for a while until his boss called him for a meeting. The boss proceeds to give him crap for not taking the mandatory 30-minute lunch, blah blah blah. My dad tries to argue the fact that it's not putting him out, but the boss insists, take the full 30 minutes. Cue malicious compliance. The next day, he shows up to work as usual, and the minute his lunch break starts, he stops working and goes on break. Over the 30 minutes he gets a few calls from his boss, doesn't answer. By this point he's finished eating and is just sitting waiting for his lunch to be over. His coworker comes in and asks if he's been getting the boss calls. My dad explains the situation and his coworker smiles and walks out. Later that night, getting back to the shop, the boss confronts my dad and starts to lose it. My dad calmly interrupts him and just says, "Sorry, I can't work during my 30-minute lunch break." Needless to say, there weren't any more issues with my dad working during his lunch break after that. The next story is titled, Cracked Windshield. This story is that of a friend of my dad's. He was in Switzerland and rented a car for a week. Upon receiving the car he noticed a small crack at the bottom of the windshield but thought nothing of it as it wasn't that big. Once the week was up he returned the car, and the car rental agency inspected the car and decided he owed the equivalent of €100 to repair the crack in the windshield. Anyway, he tried to argue that the crack had been there previous to him renting the car, and he assumed that this was a common tactic employed by the agency, whereby they rented a car with a small crack in the windshield and charged the renter for said damage to the windshield. He wasn't having any luck arguing his case. This was prior to smartphones and cameras being available, so he didn't take any photos, so he jumped on the bonnet and smashed the windshield in. The agency rep said they would charge him for damages to the car, to which he replied, "I'm already going to pay for a new windshield, I might as well make sure it's broken." The next story is titled, Don't Touch Leftovers or Food I Bought for the House. Okay, I won't. This started over a month ago when I got yelled at by one of my aunts for always finishing leftovers or thing they bought for the house, but never finished any of it, but I did, and when one of them threw out my one-day-old pizza leftovers. Now, because of everything going on in the world and the fact that I really don't have the want to be around people recently, I've been eating a lot of leftovers, most of the time leaving just the meat behind because quite frankly I'm not a huge fan of the smell or taste of meat. Well, Aunt 1, bio aunt, and Aunt 2, spiritual aunt, aren't a huge fan of the fact that I ate the leftovers the day after all the time, especially since they work from home now. So I got snapped at and told to not touch their food, or the leftovers either really. And it's not just that, they also buy food knowing I won't eat it. Here's the malicious compliance. In 1.5 months I haven't touched a single piece of leftovers and eat basically either fruits, veggies and nuts or PB&J sandwiches. And I know buy food or have my mum buy food I know they won't touch. Actually I won't even touch the food they buy for the house. So in that time, I know it's wasting food, but also I only buy enough for me to eat and that I know I will eat. And mind you, most of that is vegan if not vegetarian food and mostly fruits and nuts. The fallout: yesterday I got told by BA to stop wasting food and eat leftovers and to get food everyone will eat, to which I got to say, but you told me not to, so I haven't. Also, you don't get food everyone will eat. If you did you would also get something with no beef or pork in it. And my mother backed me up. So in 1.5 months the fridge became absolutely filled with their leftovers and had to toss all of it because it went bad because they weren't eating it. Now, I am still just going to buy vegan, vegetarian and low-waste options, mostly fruits, veggies and nuts, but I'm also taking it a few steps further by making a family dinner that's vegetarian because 1, I have a soul, and 2, because they said that going vegetarian isn't a healthy or cost-effective option. I spend maybe $15 minus $20 on food for a week, so about $60 minus $80 for a month. So you tell me I can't wait, your food or leftovers? Fine, I won't, and I'll just leave that to you, and it will be your fault if you have to throw it out cause you made too much. That's a you problem. They know I am no stranger to malicious compliance cause I played that game for 50 to 60% of high school prior to graduation and when I lived with my dad for 6 months. The next story is titled, Not Going to Shovel Snow? Then get off my site, okay. Not my story, but my grandfather worked in the sheet metal trade, so second-hand account. He was in charge of several qualified men for this mall build. This contract was bidded for the HVAC install, nothing else as far as Gramps was concerned. He can be extremely stubborn when it comes to that. The story takes place during the winter where it snowed like a son-of a idiot. With all the supplies unloaded at the job site, work was about ready to begin. This is where contractor comes into the picture. This high and mighty man thought he had say over the whole yard. Contractor, there's enough snow shovels for you and your men. Gramps, my team's not a bunch of maintenance men. We're here to do one thing and one thing only. Contractor, well, my entire team shovels snow. If you're not gonna be a part of the team, then you can get off the job site. Gramps, okay. With that, Gramps calls back to his shop and has them bring out the largest truck they have. With that, him and his team loaded up everything on the site. All the while, contractor is losing his crap. Later, they all had a meeting in which Gramps asks the question to the boss, what was our bid for? Were we to set sheet metal and HVAC or were we supposed to shovel snow? And was promptly answered with affirmation to the former. They didn't get in trouble and didn't get booted off the contract, but this act of malicious compliance definitely made it a struggle and fights between contractor and Gramps throughout the remainder of the build. The next story is titled, Tuck in My Shirt. Well, tuck this. For a little background, I used to work in a call center selling vacations for a major hotel chain. My boss was a huge douche. All he did all day long was walk around and make sure everyone had their shirt tucked in, and generally be a negative jerk who everyone hated. No customers ever saw us, and we were secluded from every other department because we were really loud. If you have ever worked in outbound sales, you know what I mean. There was literally no reason to tuck in shirts, but the boss for some reason thought this would help us sell better. I was the top salesman on the night shift, and third overall in the company. It didn't help at all. So I come into work on my birthday, and my friend runs up to me and yells, "Redditing while working. Happy B-Day," right in front of my boss's office. He looks up and says, "Redditing while working." I'm thinking he's going to say happy B-Day since he no doubt heard her. Instead, he said, "Yeah, go ahead and tuck your shirt in, K," and he does the hand signal like he's tucking in an imaginary shirt. So I say, "Okay, no prob, I just have to put my stuff down real quick and I'll take care of it." So I walk over to my desk, which takes approx 7 seconds to get to. I go to put my stuff down, and as I am, he comes up behind me again and says, "Hey, I said to tuck in your shirt." So I quickly tuck it in, and as he's walking literally right by me, I say, "Sorry, I just had to put my stuff down first," and he walks by like I never said a word. Immediately, I bust out my HR manual and check out the rule on tucked in shirts. Turns out you must tuck in all shirts except a Hawaiian shirt or a Gaiabera shirt. So right after work I take my ass to Walmart, and buy 10, and wear the most obnoxious Hawaiian-looking shirt the next day. The second I walked in, he looked me up and down, glared, turned around and walked away. When everyone asked why I was wearing such a ridiculous shirt, I told them about the loophole, and within a week half my office was wearing Hawaiian shirts. It drove my boss crazy, all within the guidelines outlined by company policy. As an update to the story from the last time I posted it, the boss eventually got fired for getting oral pleasure from one of the girls in the call center while he was in his office. I had already moved on to another company by then, but when I heard, I got a nice chuckle out of it. The next story is titled, No Earlier, No Later. Okay, I'll just come right on time. I deliver food for a major company for a living, and while most of our customers are very nice, we get the occasional person who drives us crazy. One customer requested her food be delivered at 5:30 p.m. I left the store at about 5:20 p.m., knowing it'd take about 10 minutes to get there. I ended up getting stuck behind slow drivers and arrived at 5:34 p.m. This woman flipped out. She was yelling at me and telling me that when she requests something for a specific time, it had better be there at that time, no sooner, no later. I got where she was coming from, but due to a variety of reasons, including not wanting drivers to drive dangerously to arrive at the specified time, we cannot guarantee that it'll happen on the dot. She wasn't hearing any of it. No tip, but that was no surprise given her reaction. The following week, the same woman ordered again for the same time. This time around, we had more help in the store and I got the order out earlier than normal. I thought, F it, and went to get something to eat. I parked on the next street over and ate my food slowly, then delivered her food at exactly 5:30 p.m. This time around she was on her phone and didn't say a word to me. No tip again. This process repeated, but I came to enjoy having some quiet time to eat, even if I wasn't getting tipped. One day, I was in a particularly mischievous mood and decided to just sit outside her house and eat my lunch. When I finally rang the doorbell at 5:30 p.m., she immediately whipped open her door and yelled, "Have you been sitting outside my house this whole time with my food?" Yes. Why in the hell didn't you bring it to me then? 'Cause you said when you ordered something for 5:30, you wanted it at 5:30. It's 5:30. Didn't want to bring it to you too early. No tip. Worth it. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.